The House is resumed. Kia ora tātou no reira te whare inga iwi, inga rio, inga hawe wha, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good evening, honourable members. I understand that when the House was last debating the third reading of the Student Loan Scheme Amendment Bill, that the Honourable John Banks was speaking, and the Minister has 4 minutes and 30 seconds remaining to speak if he so wishes to take the call. Otherwise, someone else can take the call. I call the Honourable Member David Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It's early, it's early, it's early.
It's very kind. Mr. Speaker, Treasury Budget Advice has stated that the student loan restrictions passed by the government over the last 2 years are likely to see 25,000 current borrowers lose access to student loans and will likely mean that they cannot afford to study anymore. I rise to speak following Mr. Banks, who made a number of observations, many of which I would wish to disagree with. I will select a few just to put on the record some concerns about the general direction he would like to take this loan scheme. Mr. Banks suggested that loans have been growing and tertiary student numbers have been declining. As far as I'm aware, there wouldn't be a long-term data set that would indicate student tertiary numbers were in decline. I'm not sure which particular data set he has been reading or perhaps what country he's been living in, but perhaps recently the member suggests that ACT Party pass rates have been declining, but I can't comment further on that matter. That may or may not be true. I'm also advised that Mr. Banks had his pilot's licence at 16 years of age, and I'm aware that the student loan restrictions that now have cut in have restricted access to loans for training in just that area, and there's a deep irony in that. Mr. Speaker, Labor will be opposing the Student Loan Amendment Bill, and that is unfortunate. It is because the National Party were unwilling to consider a very reasonable amendment that we put up to ensure that the student loan repayment holiday remained at 3 years. The current government wishes to cut that to 1 year, and it fits, I guess, with their general approach, which is to restrict further access to loans and to allowances. We've recently heard about thresholds not being adjusted with inflation, and this is because their view about this is fundamentally different to ours. The Labor Party believes that education should be something that is accessible to all people, because it is about fairness and opportunity for the Labor Party. It is about making sure that people have an opportunity to make the best of their talents and are then able to make their best contribution to our society. And this is something that benefits all New Zealanders. When people make their best contribution, it benefits us socially, it benefits us individually in terms of our own well-being and that of our families, and it benefits the economy more widely. And there is plenty of evidence which suggests that those who are from less fortunate backgrounds ought to be fully supported into tertiary studies as a country can afford it, because the returns to GDP are so strong, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, the National Party does not seem to wish to listen to this logic, and over the last couple of years they've made a series of further restrictions to student loan eligibility. And that has seen tens of thousands of New Zealanders shut out of higher education, and that is a great shame. And the unfortunate thing too is that they've declared they're not finished yet. Their leader John Key recently suggested that National would rein in student loans in a big way, that they're not finished yet. And he should come clean, I think, sooner rather than later, to let students know just how much further access is going to be restricted for study purposes, because people are being shut out of the opportunity of tertiary education and shut out of the opportunity to better themselves, better their lot for them and their families and for our country as a whole. We are particularly concerned as a party about clause 17 of the bill, which slashes this student loan repayment holiday. To use an example, when one takes out a mortgage and repays the terms of that mortgage, it's quite legitimate to go and get another mortgage with a bank, and receive similar terms and conditions. The National Party here is putting forward a situation where if you've taken one student repayment holiday on your loan, you will not get another. The terms and conditions change. That will adversely affect second chance learners, Mr. Speaker, and I think that's a great shame, because second chance learners are often those who have been through hard times, who have, through no fault of their own, not perhaps appreciated the opportunities the first time round and are determined to make the best of their opportunities next time round. And the more people that are shut out of tertiary education, the worse for our country. It's also true that it will shut people off from taking longer overseas experiences as young people, and that will restrict the contacts they can build up during their time overseas, and will also restrict their ability to mature in their particular industries and bring that experience back to New Zealand. Some studies suggest that it's 12 to 18 months on average before a person on an overseas trip finds their niche, finds relevant experience in their chosen field, and an ability to repay their loan balance effectively, and also the requisite opportunities to better themselves in order to come home to New Zealand and contribute further. So Labour opposes this cutting of the repayment holiday from 3 years to 1 year, and opposes the restrictions on young New Zealanders and the putting in jeopardy of that overseas experience, so rich in our cultural imagination and so beneficial to those that undertake it. And the worst point of all, a point I haven't yet made, is that these changes risk forcing New Zealanders not to come back. We already know that many New Zealanders, once they incur interest overseas, once it starts getting a wee bit out of hand, choose not to come home, and we lose the benefits of their education and their experience by making this all too difficult. Mr. Speaker, we should be looking for ways to make it easier for New Zealanders to come back and make their contribution, not easier to stay away. And it's interesting that this repayment holiday proposal has been put forward by Mr. Peter Dunn, who just 5 years ago had a very different view. And to put it on the record, if I can quote, if I may, Peter Dunn's Student Loan Scheme Amendment Bill number 2 in the committee in March 2007, Mr. Dunn said the reality they all faced was a very massive debt upon their return to New Zealand, which in some cases would be enough for them to make the decision not to come home at all, and our country would be the loser. We needed to take a pragmatic way through this, and being someone who places great virtue on pragmatism, it struck me that the logical course of action was to derive the solution that we have, to extend the holiday period for 3 years, recognising the fact that young New Zealanders take that extended period overseas. Well, as we know, the Labour Party put forward an amendment to the current proposal to ensure that that 3-year provision stayed in place. We're yet to hear a convincing argument from Mr. Dunn on pragmatic or other...
Point of order, Honourable.
I apologise for interrupting, but I do want to remind the Speaker in the call of the Speaker's rulings around referring to amendments put up in committee stage and defeated, that they shouldn't be referred to in third reading, and I wonder if he was straying into that area.
Well, this is a third reading. It's generally sort of a wrapping up of what's gone on in the committee in times before.
Speaking to that, Paul?
Yes.
I'm just aware of Speaker's ruling 123.1 on the third reading of a bill. A member cannot discuss the merits of an amendment proposed by a member and ruled out of order in committee. And I do fear that...
Order. When we have a point of order on the floor, it's heard in silence.
Speaking to point of order.
I think, speaking to David Parker.
I think the senior whip for the National Party's mistake is that the amendment wasn't ruled out of order, but it was voted down. It's a different matter.
Yes, I've just noticed that. So, but I'd ask the member to continue speech and just be careful.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
David Clark.
So I mean, the point here is, and we are wrapping up here what has happened through the stages, and the general point I'm trying to make is that the National Party continues to put barriers in the way to access to tertiary education, where the Labour Party wishes to make tertiary education more accessible to more people, to ensure that we have the kind of social mobility in our society that we would like to have. It is true that we don't have the social mobility that we would desire, We know that the greatest determiner of a tertiary level of success for a student in studies has shown that it's the mother's level of education that dictates how likely a student is to achieve tertiary success. The second biggest determinant is father's level of education, and socioeconomic status is indeed up there as well, but not quite as high. So there are various barriers already in place, and socioeconomic status is one of those, and it is significant, and restricting access to loans and allowances moves in exactly the wrong direction when we're trying to achieve access to tertiary education. Now, the worst part about this bill is that the Treasury and the Ministry of Education have both said that it's unlikely that the gains expected will be realised in terms of restricting this holiday, that it's unlikely that money will be recouped, that the coffers will be the richer for this policy that's being enacted, and so it's a bit of a farce. We're spending $2.6 million worth of parliamentary time as one estimate on this particular bill, and the estimates that the IRD has provided is that it will recoup $14 million for the taxpayer. Now, the Labor Party supports efforts to make sure that those who have debts pay them. Make no mistake about that. But these estimates from the IRD are not supported by other departments, and it appears that they're based on a best guess scenario. That's what in Select Committee we were told, that there was an element of guesswork in just what would be recouped through these changes to the student loans legislation. So, Mr Speaker, I put it to you that there would be better ways of ensuring that we achieve the goal of making sure people pay their debts. This bill is something the Labor Party will oppose because we believe in fairness and opportunity and access to tertiary education. Thank you.
Mr Speaker.
I call the Honourable Member Holly Walker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased to take a